your position?
Yes, it is a moot issue, meaning there is no weaponization fund. The weaponization fund is dead. It's not moving forward.
But just to be clear, the President of the United States, who is a plaintiff in this lawsuit, has not agreed in writing to delete the weaponization fund.
I suppose they could bring a lawsuit, and then we would litigate it. But even if we were litigating it, there's no fund.
I want to stick a fork in this turkey of a 1776 fund. And you've said that it's moot. I think that the courts are probably going to deal with it, but why should we waste the court capacity on this issue? If I could walk to the Senate floor with an agreed-to piece of text coming from the administration that just renders this whole thing dead, gone, can I get your commitment to maybe provide us with some technical assistance on what that language would look like?
Absolutely.
Thank you.
Joining me tonight after a wild day in Washington, my political and legal sources are here. Ellie Honig, first off, that's Todd Blanche there answering those questions. Jay Clayton today, who we've heard from Todd Blanche many times testifying. We had not really heard from Jay Clayton, certainly in this sense. Right now he's running where you used to work, the SDNY. What did you make of what he said or did not say today?
Well, obviously it was embarrassing. It was humiliating. And the senators seemed to take some pleasure in rubbing his face in it. But that's what you walk into when you won't acknowledge the truth. The reason this all matters, this is more than just a semantic game. Because if you have a job like the DNI or the Attorney General, part of your job is reckoning with truths, whether they're helpful or harmful, so that our government can react accordingly. And I think Jay Clayton exposed himself as being, let's remember, he is woefully unqualified to be the director of national intelligence. The only reason he seems okay is because the prior nominee, Bill Pulte, had zero experience. Jay Clayton has 1 year as head of the SDNY. Big job, not a national intelligence job, does not remotely equip you to be the DNI. And I think he's exposed himself as being completely unqualified for that position. Better by comparison than the first guy, but still unqualified.
Amisha, what did you make of it?
Well, I think that one of the bigger takeaways here is the one around, Trump loves to throw around Trump derangement syndrome. And the biggest example of that is Trump himself and his acolytes who refuse to acknowledge the results of the 2020 election. But to Ellie's point, there's a access of not being qualified, but he's not the first person that the president has nominated that was not qualified. So we continue to see this happen over and over again. But the failure to answer basic questions and the ones that he did answer lack significant knowledge and proof points. That should give a lot of people pause.
Well, and a lot of people might look at this and say, why does it matter what they say? 2020 is done. We've moved on. Trump has already won the election since then. He's now president. But when Jay Clayton was asked about his predecessor, Tulsi Gabbard, his would-be predecessor if he's confirmed, Tulsi Gabbard, and when she was there at the site of that raid in Atlanta to talk about its election results in 2020, this is how he answered that question.
The first time you learned that Director Gabbard was present at that raid was in my office yesterday?
It was the first time that, in my recollection, I've thought about it recently. Now, was I aware of it before?
What?
You brought it to my attention yesterday.
Okay.
I had not.
So you had not known.
I had not thought about it until you brought it to my attention yesterday.
Your answers lack credibility.
Even if you weren't aware, in preparation for this hearing, I would have thought, hey, we got to be ready for the Gabbard questions.
Yeah, I don't want to. It just wasn't something that was on my mind before the preparation for this hearing.
Not a great moment. Not a great moment that we all got to see. But I watched these hearings today. I spent a lot of time watching them and thought about when I've worked to prep people for testifying before Congress as recently as earlier this month. And what you do is you try and say, how are we going to limit damage as much as possible? And the politics of here tell us what that damage is. Terrible moment to be a witness and not be able to answer those sort of fundamental questions. But your audience is the president, and you want the president's support. You're going to contort yourself however you can so that you don't lose his support, because you know that during that hearing, Donald Trump could sweep the leg out from under you and your nomination is over. So they did, bizarrely as it looked, what they needed to do. And what we saw with Tom Tillis tells us why we expect he'll vote yes now.
Well, I'm not convinced that he didn't know. I think that was an out flat lie. However, he did not want them to ask multiple follow-up questions based on that knowledge. And I think that by saying he didn't know, claiming ignorance to the fact that, all of us saw this on national television, it was run pretty widely at the time of it happening. There isn't a person in the world who will prep you, and I prep people for congressional testimony as well, who will prep you without understanding the types of questions that may come up. That was a pretty basic question. He didn't want to answer it. He didn't want to dig any deeper. So he claimed to not know.
Well, because the question was, before he was saying he didn't really know much about it, what John Ossoff was trying to get out there, who obviously is the senator from Georgia, is if you're instructed to do something similar to that, as the director of national intelligence, would you be on site for something like that? Because Tulsi Gabbard was criticized, people saying that is not the job of the director of national intelligence to be there in a law enforcement capacity.
Exactly. It goes to Jay Clayton's conception of what that job as DNI entails. And to be on site of a search warrant, to have the DNI there is completely out of place, is completely ridiculous. And I think that would have been the natural follow-up had he acknowledged that he remembered anything. And one other thing about Jay Clayton, I don't know him. He took over the U.S. Attorney's Office at SDNY a couple years after I left. But I know plenty of people there. And the reputation of Jay Clayton is that he's a chameleon, that he goes by to get by, he goes along to get along, that he lacks the backbone to stand up for that office. He's not as over-the-top offensive as some other folks we've seen in high positions at DOJ, but he's not deeply respected in that office right now, and tears were not shed when he was nominated for this job if he gets it someday.